strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Now here's your host, Morin-van.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I am your host, Morin-van. Thank you so much for tuning in live to Strategy Talks. I want to make sure that everybody is welcomed. Those who are here live, those who are here watching this on the replay, put hashtag replay in the comments so that my guest and I can answer questions if you have them. And we know that you're watching the replay. And a special shout out to our podcast listeners. This is episode 19. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I have a wonderful guest with me today. Before I introduce her to all of you, I want to do a quick shout out to Social Insider. Those is a wonderful company that sponsors Strategy Talks. They are the intuitive dashboard for social media analytics, reporting, and competitors analysis for brands and agencies and for social media professionals just like you and me. So thank you so much, Social Insider. And now, without much further ado, I'm going to bring my guest onto the screen with us. Welcome, Anne.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let me give everybody your bio so they know who I'm talking to today. So Anne Popolizio is the owner. See, I knew I was going to do this, Anne. Is the owner of the digital marketing agency Social Squid. In school, Anne was the nerdiest of creatives and the most creative of the nerds. This balance serves her well in social media. She focuses on specificity in storytelling for your ideal client, and she's obsessed with analytics so you can measure the results of your effort. She's been doing social media for businesses since 2011 and knows how to leverage your social media following into real customers. So, Anne, I have read your bio before and I absolutely love it. The nerdiest of nerds, right? Absolutely. This is great. So, Anne, we're going to talk about tracking ads performance, something that business owners need to know about.
Yeah. So there were some big changes recently. If you listened to Facebook, the sky was falling. It was the end of the world. Everyone was freaking out. Everyone was panicking. Major news outlets were reporting on it. If you were paying any attention, this was the iOS 14.5 update. Big changes were made, but what you and I are going to talk about today is whether or not the sky actually fell.
And did it?
No, it did not fall. No, all was well.
Okay, all right. So let's start with that, right? So you're a business owner, you're watching this. I've got this expert here, Anne. What are some things that people need to know? You just said the sky didn't fall, which is great. So what are some things we need to know? Because changes were made and things are not working as they were before.
Yeah. So the biggest changes that were made with this update, you may have noticed if you have an iPhone, it now pops up and asks you, allow app to track across other applications or websites. And, most people, I think something like 88% of people are saying, nope, myself included. I mean, come on. So that was the biggest change, especially the most front-facing, most visible change that was made. There's consequences to that, right? So
that was going to be my question. So 88% of people say no, don't track me. What does that mean?
So what that means, where the consequence was for advertisers, particularly Facebook advertisers, is most retargeting was done through, actually, let me rephrase that, not necessarily most, but retargeting, a large part of retargeting was done through pixel-based retargeting. So the pixel is a little piece of code that you put onto your website, and it was browser-based, and it's, kind of like a cookie, and, a little little code goes on your site. And every time a customer visited your website and they visited page A, page B, page C, and then they opted in for a lead magnet, or they purchased whatever, or they added a product to cart and then pieced out. Your website was sending a message back to Facebook saying, hey, this person just did X, Y, Z, also A, B, and C. And what changed is now people have the option to say, no, Facebook doesn't get to send that message back when I'm on my iOS device. If I have opted out, Facebook doesn't get to track me across other things, then that browser-based pixel isn't going to fire as accurate. I mean, it's going to fire. It's just not necessarily the sense of that Facebook will check to make sure someone's opted out of tracking. And then if they have, then it doesn't record supposedly. That's
a lot of information. So that information changes the way you, as an ad specialist, place ads or put ads together, or your ability, what does it? So that we've all been there, right? You go to buy that Christmas sweater, you are on the website. You decide, maybe I better ask my husband if he really wants that Christmas sweater. So I back out the cart, I go to Facebook, and boom, there is that same exact Christmas sweater, which is crazy, right there on Facebook. Are you sure you don't want to buy this, right? So if that doesn't happen, so how do you then, as a retailer, as an advertiser, as a service provider, as a product provider, how can you now run the ads? So what does that mean? How does that impact?
Yeah. So just a little side note, most of those kinds of ads, if you went onto Facebook and that sweater was there, yes, that was Facebook's pixel firing. The website was talking back to Facebook, and Facebook was like, oh, this person wants this product. And Facebook was then serving the ad. But most of those kinds of retargeting ads are actually through Google ads. And that wasn't impacted by this because Google uses what are called first-party cookies, and Facebook was using a third party, and that was the issue. We're not going to get into those details right now, but Google still has all its game on. But to answer your question, how do you as an advertiser deal with this kind of situation? So one thing that was not impacted was on Facebook, retargeting based on Facebook behavior or on Instagram behavior. That didn't change. And so Facebook still knows that Facebook still knows what you're doing on Facebook. If I'm running an ad for a particular product and you clicked on that ad, Facebook still knows that you clicked on that ad. And so there can be retargeting based on, at the Facebook level. But what the scenario that you outlined, where I didn't come in from Facebook, I went to a website, that kind of retargeting is a lot harder. And so there's certain companies where that was impacted. But again, most of the retargeting that happens where the product is following you around the internet, that's not coming from Facebook. That's usually coming from Google Ads.
Google. Okay, that's really great information. Yeah. I actually didn't know that. So that's great. Yeah, so that's good to know.
Facebook display ads are
okay.
But so what do we backing this up as an advertiser? What do you do? The biggest piece where there was an impact was not so much in that the sale isn't happening or that the behavior isn't happening. It was the ability to actually to attribute it back to a particular ad. That's where the biggest loss was for advertisers. Retargeting was a component of what was lost, but not all retargeting was lost. I mean, if you listen to some people, it sounded like, retargeting suddenly became impossible. Not at all the case. Certain kinds of retargeting did become very difficult, much more difficult. And so if it's I've added this product to cart in the last 3 days and then I abandoned my cart, retargeting that's based on that very particular behavior would become more difficult with the iOS 14.5 changes to that, and that just is what it is. But again, all retargeting was not lost. And if you've got, a store on Instagram, like Facebook, Instagram still knows what's going on. If I'm looking at the product on Instagram knows.
Right.
So looking at what can you do, where we took a big shift, again, the sales and the conversions were still happening, attribution was where we saw the biggest loss. So where we made the biggest shift was actually with how we did tracking and what tools we were using as primary sources for tracking. So whereas I used to use Ads Manager for conversion tracking as my primary source for tracking, we are now leaning very heavily on Google Analytics. And I cross-reference between Google Analytics and Ads Manager.
And you're talking about Facebook Ads Manager, right? So
Correct, yes,
yeah,
yes.
just to clarify that. So before you were heavily reliant on Facebook Ads Messenger, and now you're
Ads
pulling
Manager.
Ads
Yeah.
Manager.
Yeah.
And so now you're pulling in Google Analytics.
Yeah, we're leaning. I mean, we always had Google Analytics set up, but it was always like the secondary thing I would look at it. Like, I'd use it to, more troubleshoot, is there an issue going on? But like Ads Manager was what I was using, if I'm like, how are my ads doing? That's really where I was paying, the most attention. But now in terms of conversion tracking, we've switched over to really relying on Google Analytics. So looking at like what advertisers can do, you definitely want to make sure that your Google Analytics is properly set up, that you've got goals set up, and that you also have Google Analytics 4 set up, because that is the big change that's coming next year.
Google Analytics 4. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so basically Google Analytics, as we know it, is going bye-bye. And they've come out with GA4. If you've been doing Facebook advertising, it's actually maybe going to be a little less crazy, because it's going to be more event-driven. And that's language that Facebook marketers really understand already. So that's a little plus for us. But it's going to allow you to, the priorities of tracking and the strategy for tracking are going to change. We don't need to get into too much detail here about what that's going to look like.
No, but
yeah.
Yeah. So just talking about, if you're a business owner, you've been running Facebook ads, you have somebody in charge, checking with them that they have not just access to the ads manager, but you give them all needed access to Google Analytics.
Yes.
Ask them about Google Analytics 4. Are you prepared? Are you getting ready? Those are some of the things that they need to discuss with whoever's in charge of their ads.
Yeah.
And one of the other things I want to bring up, and you and I work together on accounts, is that there's a lot of business owners who don't have access to their own Google Analytics and don't know whether it's set up. So if you're watching this, and if you're going to take anything away from what Anne is talking about, this is kind of a high level, ads performance conversation. Make sure that you go to your webmaster. Make sure that you go to your marketing team. And if you don't have a big team, if you just have one person charge of social media, make sure that Google Analytics is set up. You have access. They have access. They understand how to read it. And if you don't, who would you need to hire, Anne?
So for Google Analytics setup, there's a few different kinds of people that would do it. The people that seem to do it the most and do it the best are SEO agencies. They have to, that is their primary measurement tool and always has been. So they tend to be the ones that will set things up. Webmasters might not be fluent in Google Analytics.
Okay.
So that's something to keep in mind. There are people out there that will do, a Google Analytics setup. I've heard people recommend, just go on like Fiverr or Upwork or something like that. I don't do that, but by all means. But typically any SEO agency will know how to do correct Google Analytics setup.
Okay. And that makes sense. So, investing in paid ads it's the next step, right? I actually interviewed somebody just a little while ago, talked about SEO, and was talking to him about, kind of what your, where you get to clients and how they enter. And he said, actually, one of the questions that I ask people, if they'd invested any money in marketing, if they have not invested any money in marketing, they don't need to come to my agency and ask about SEO, because you have to invest in marketing. So if we apply that to this conversation, if you're ready to do Facebook ads, you have to be investing money in marketing, right? You have to have somebody who's doing social media, who's doing other types of marketing. You have to have a website. You have to have all those pieces in place. And then, we're talking about ads. Now, if somebody's already running ads, this is an important conversation to have with whomever is running the ads, and asking for reports, right? So let's talk a little bit about reporting, because you're talking about tracking the ads. What are some things that people need to look for, or people should pay attention to now that this shift has happened and new things are coming?
Yeah, that's a really important question. So obviously you want to look at what your conversions are. You want to decide what are the numbers that you need to track in order to measure success for you. And then you want to look at those numbers every single month. You also want to make sure that you look at numbers in context with each other. You don't want to just look at a single number and have a panic attack over it. Look at numbers in context. And, if you've got a blog article and you're looking at bounce rate's not a meaningful metric to the success of a blog article. The point of a blog article is to read the article. Most people are going to go, if they've clicked off from a Facebook ad, I'm going to click off the Facebook ad, I'm going to land on the article, I'm going to read the article, and then I'm going to go back to Facebook. That's standard behavior, and I wouldn't have an expectation of something different. The meaningful touch is that they read the article, and so that's the measurement. The time on page is the measurement that's more important for something like a blog article. That being said, if you want to have your blogs be, use your blogs for conversion, then you want to look at, conversion opportunities and optimizing that. But that's a whole other process. That's not the question you just asked. So look at the conversions. Look at the other piece too, is especially like with the lead generation. If you're doing like straight e-commerce, it's pretty straightforward. Like you had X number of view content, of view product, you had X number of or Y number of add to carts, and you had so many purchases, and you want to calculate the conversion rates between each one of those steps. Those are really critical numbers for you to be paying attention to. And that's pretty straightforward. It's very linear. If you're selling a lower price point product, it's not hard to make those sales. The challenge, especially like if you're in the B2B space, if it's like a high consequence purchase, it's a long buying cycle. So now we're talking about things like insurance, real estate, anything B2B. Especially if you're dealing with mid-size or larger companies, you're no longer dealing directly with the owner. There you need to look at, obviously, lead generation. You want to be paying attention to cost per lead, but cost per lead is not the be all and end all. What you ultimately want to be paying attention to is your cost per acquisition. So you need to be paying attention not just to how many leads come in, but how many customers come out the other end.
Right.
And for some areas that gets really muddy. You lose the attribution. So that's another place where having Google Analytics properly set up and properly integrated with your CRM, so that you can see things like multi-touch attribution. Someone has visited your website X number of times, took X, Y number of actions on your site, read your email, and you can see this pattern evolving over time. If you have a good CRM, it's going to give you that information. If you have your Google Analytics and your website integration set up properly, you start to get that information, and then you start to be able to map out an actual customer journey. And those are the numbers. The first phase of being able to say, is it good or bad, is simply data collection. And then, looking at what's actually happening, getting a sense of that. And then you can start to, test something. It's like, okay, we made this change. What was the consequence? And then we made another change. What was the consequence? And so those are, I think, numbers that pretty important to be paying attention to. Each business is going to be slightly different, but
That's awesome. Well, Anne, thank you for your time today. We are actually already at the end. I just wanted to have this conversation. I think it's important. There's a lot of people, business owners, coaches, even social media professionals that work in the social media sphere and not necessarily with paid, that don't understand all of the changes that happen. So having an expert on my show to kind of break it down, I think is really important. I'm really, really glad that you're here, especially as these changes continue to happen. And as you said, next year, July 2023, I'll be sending people to this podcast and say, well, Anne talked about it in May of 2022. So we do have a rapid fire round that I forgot to tell you about. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions.
Okay.
They're very simple. Video meetings or in-person meetings?
Video.
Okay. Angry client or angry coworker?
Angry coworker.
Book smarts or street smarts?
Book smart.
All right. Awesome. Well, Anne, tell our listeners and our viewers where they can connect with you and how they can connect with you.
You can find me at socialsquib.com. That's SQUIB as in boy.com. And you can go on there and learn more about us and grab an appointment if you need to.
All right. And what social media platform are you most active on if people want to find you and follow you on social? Okay, Instagram. All right, awesome. Well, Anne, thank you so much for your time today being with us. I absolutely love all your knowledge. And for those watching and listening, anything I need about ads, I always go to Anne. So I'm really, really glad she's here. She is my expert of choice. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, tag Anne and she can answer them. Go to her website, learn more about Social Squib. And thank you so much, Anne, for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.